So, as you guys know, I have been trying to recently get back into reviewing stuff more habitually lately and not just do it like every so often. I'm trying to do it in a more consistent basis. And, you know, it occurred to me that, oh shit, I actually haven't reviewed this season of The Politician, and I've seen it. I watched it back in June. I meant to review it, and I just never did. It was back at the time when I wasn't really doing any videos on YouTube. You know, I just wasn't really focused on it at all because of, you know, other things in my life at the time. But I figured, you know what better time to review it than on election day? Because, you know, we're going through an election right now. Politician's all about elections and things like that, so might as well do that. Also, you know, just just a way to show everyone that, you know, you should exercise your right to vote and all that kind of stuff. Of course, if you haven't already, you know, I hope that you did, but that's a whole different conversation. Let's talk about this season. So what this season, of course, is essentially about is, once again, we center on Peyton. It takes place about, you know, around the same time where season 1 left off. It's like 5 years after the events of season 1. Peyton is getting out of college and things like that, and his main focus now is to run for state senator. He wants to run against Dee Standish, who he has recently found out is involved in this throuple, and so he wants to use that and anything else he can to his advantage to try to make sure that he wins this time, and hopefully things go a lot better than his last campaign. So I was very excited for this season going into it. The way that season 1 left off, I thought was fantastic. You know, season 1, I didn't think was like an amazing season, but it had a lot of promise. It had a lot of potential behind it. You know, it had some really fun characters. It had a really good premise. It was just a really good satire. And the way things left off, it really seemed like this season was going to have a lot more forward momentum. There was going to be a lot more going on with this season. You know, all the stuff we found out with Dee Standish, who seemed to be a very interesting character, and the way that they were setting up, you know, all the other characters coming back and them having a lot more to do, it just seemed like there was going to be a lot more going on this season for sure. I was very excited to see the way things would play out, and I will say this is still a really good season of television. It's not as good as I hoped it would be. It pretty much is on par with the first season, though, I would say. I think there are some things it does do a little bit better than the first season, but overall, it's pretty much on the same level, I would say. But we're just going to get into it right now. So, similar to the first season, one of the best things about this entire season is the cast here, who, I mean, once again, everyone just delivers in the best way that they can, especially when it comes to Ben Platt, who, once again, just really showcases how good of a character Peyton Hobart really is. He's very charismatic, but he also is going through a little bit more this season. He's made some mistakes before, and he's trying to do what he can to try to repair some of that, and I thought Platt did a really good job. There's a little bit more self-reflection for Peyton this season. There's a bit of an arc that he goes through, and I really love just seeing Platt play this role. You can tell that he really understands this character very well. He really is in tune with Peyton's emotions, and I just think he's absolutely one of the big highlights of this show. I think if Platt wasn't as good as he was, I don't think this show would be nearly as good as it was, and I just really loved what he ended up doing here overall. I thought, you know, similar to the first season, he was a huge standout for me throughout. But someone else who absolutely makes this season is the addition of Judith Light as Dee Standish, who I think does a really good job as starting off as Peyton's opposition, but also really showing someone that's similar to Peyton in the sense where Standish is someone that is willing to get whatever she wants to do well, and the lengths that she's willing to go, the way that she prides herself, the way that she looks at herself, and what she's willing to risk, you know, for this election. I thought she just did a really good job with that. She has some really incredible moments throughout the season. I thought that she was just a very, very good addition overall, and I really like what she ended up bringing to the table. I thought, you know, she had a lot of promise at the end of season 1, and she definitely did deliver on it, and I really liked what we ended up getting out of her here for sure. For me, though, the absolute standout of this season, and really really the person that just kept me entertained throughout was Bette Midler as Hadassah Gold, who I just think was an absolute riot in this season, mainly because Hadassah is someone that in any other show, Hadassah would be, like, the weird, like, eccentric character that is just so hyperactive and everyone sees as just very strange. But because everyone is that way, Hadassah is almost the most normal out of everyone, and Midler just pulls that off perfectly. The way that she is constantly trying to keep everyone calm, the way that she's always trying to do what she can so things go her way, you know, make sure that things work out for Dee Dee, but also try to keep her sanity, I just think is so much fun to watch. She has so many hilarious moments throughout this entire season, and for me, like I said, I was the absolute standout. Every time she was on screen, I was laughing hysterically. I honestly forgot how funny Bette Midler can be when you give her the right material, and this is definitely one of her best performances in a while. I loved everything that she did here. I think she brought so much fun to this season, and I think honestly this season is worth watching alone just to see her performance, because it really is just pure comedic gold, and I loved everything that she ended up doing here. And the chemistry between Bette Midler and Judith Light is just spot on. These two are so much fun to watch together. Honestly, some of the best parts of the season are just watching these two scheme. The amount of stress that they're going through, but also just the amount of fun that they're clearly having in these roles. Both of them just do a really great job, and I already really enjoyed them in the finale of season 1, but this season, I think we really just get to see how fun their dynamic really is, and I really enjoyed watching both of their interactions throughout the season. But as far as the rest of the cast goes, they also do some really great work. All of the actors from last season are really good here, whether it's Gwyneth Paltrow, who is back this season. She is still really great here for sure. I really did like what she ended up contributing. There are two actresses that have a lot more to do this season for sure. One of them is Julie Schlaepfer, who obviously has a much bigger role this season compared to the first one, because Alice as a character plays a far more significant role into things, and she really kills it. I really liked what she ended up doing here. I thought that she was a really big standout. Laura Dreyfuss, I loved this season. I liked her in season 1, but they do give McAfee a little bit more to do, and I thought that she was just so much fun to watch. I love what she ended up doing. Zoey Deutch is not in this season as much as she was in season 1, but whenever she's there, she's a ton of fun. I love Infinity as a character, and she was definitely a lot of fun to watch here for sure. I really liked, I really liked Ronnie Jones, Theo, Germaine. Everyone really does a great job in terms of the cast here. Once again, I don't really think there was a weak link similar to season 1. I don't think there was a weak link in terms of actors here. But now we got to get to the directing and the writing, because I think that's something else that works very well within the show. The directing is still really good, but what I like about the directing this season is that it's not afraid to, similar to the first season, get really insightful. And, while it is definitely a really good satire, it does feel just a little bit... And honestly, going into the season, it seemed like things were going to be a little bit more darker, a little bit more mature. The tone hasn't really changed all that much, though. It's still silly. It doesn't take itself too seriously. But I think this is what works so well about the directing. When you're working with someone like Ryan Murphy, who is very haphazard when it comes to his writing, as much as I do enjoy a lot of his stuff, his directing isn't the most polished, so to speak, so I think this is really the best way to go about it, is just to be really silly and goofy, and I think they do a good job with that. But the show isn't afraid to have some really good heart in there as well. There is a lot of heart to the show, even more so than the first season, and I thought that was also really well done. So I think the directing is still very strong. I enjoy it a lot, and I think it really does work for this show, but the writing as well is something that very much did impress me, because similar to the first season, I think this season does a really good job with exploring Peyton, but this season isn't just about Peyton. It's a little bit more of an ensemble show. We get to see a bit more of the other characters going on within Peyton. Like, yes, we get more into who Peyton is, and we still are kind of questioning whether what he's doing, is it sincere or is it not, in the first season, it was everything he was doing with Infinity. This season is more about climate change and him kind of using that as like the basis of his campaign. And are his efforts sincere, or is he just doing it to like curry favor and like look good in the public eye? That's still something we very much do deal with this season. That's still a recurring theme throughout season 2 of this show. However, what I also like is that that's not the only focus of this season. We get to see a few more of the other characters, like, say, Dee Dee Standish, for example, who I think represents a very interesting point of view in this show, because she's someone that is doing a lot of similar things to Peyton, but she sees herself as a little bit more superior because she's older, she's lived longer, and so the season gets a little bit more into, like, the generational divide between these two. You know, do these two want the same things, or are they different? You know, that's something else that we're trying to get into is, you know, what's really going on with Dee Dee, but also getting into this throuple and everything she's involved with. I think they do a really good job with that. You honestly, I think, get to know as much about Dee Dee as you did with Peyton, and I think by the end of this season, you really do understand where both of them are coming from in terms of their viewpoints, and I think the show does a really good job with that. I really ended up liking her character a lot, and I thought there was something that was very well tied in, but also some of the secondary characters have a little bit more to do this season this time around. Like, for example, the character of, the character of McAvee. In the first season, she really was just Peyton's, like, campaign advisor, and here she is too, but we also know that she is kind of a double agent at this point. She is working for Dee Dee Standish, and so we kind of see what's going on with her there. But then there's a really great scene where she's trying to have a love life and a sex life, but she's so focused on the campaign, and I thought that was a really good move for her character. I really liked what they ended up doing with her this season. She ends up being someone that is focused on the campaign, but she also is simultaneously trying to have that normal life, and it made sense why that was like her only character in the first season, because that is really what she cares about the most at the end of the day, and I enjoyed that about McAvee this time. I thought she was a really fun character. I thought they really played into the dynamic well of Deutch and Platt, because of course they have worked together on Dear Evan Hansen, and this season reminds you of that these two do have a lot of hits. These two have worked together, and they take advantage of that this season, and that's something I very much did appreciate. I think they definitely did capture that pretty well. Alice as well has a lot more to do this season. I really enjoy the dynamic between her and Peyton. I think it was a different sort of storyline for Peyton, because yes, we saw them together in the beginning of season 1, but they broke up pretty soon after, the events of the first episode. So to actually see them together and their relationship, do they want the same thing? Is this working out for them? Is this more of a detriment to both of them? I thought was a really good choice, and I really liked what they ended up doing with their relationship this season. It really felt like you got to know Alice more as a character as well. She isn't really just Peyton's girlfriend anymore by the end of the season. There's a little bit more going on with her, which I wasn't really expecting, but I really like that the show ended up doing that. So the show does make a concerted effort, I think, to dive more into these other characters. It isn't just focused on Peyton this season. That was something I hope that they would do. That's something that any good second season of a show should do, and I like that the show definitely did try to do that. I think that was definitely very effective, but I also think the social commentary is even better this season, because again, besides the generational gap, the show is also trying to talk about things like, say, cancel culture. There's a whole episode centered around Peyton and like this leaked photo going around of him, and of course it's trying to be like a satire on things that are said about certain politicians, whether it be senators, whether it be vice president, president, you name it. The show is clearly trying to shed light on that, and they do a really good job with it. Yes, it's funny, but you really do understand the satire of what they're trying to do, and I thought that was really well handled. I didn't really have any issues with the way they went about that, and again, because it's not a subtle show, no Ryan Murphy show really is, you always worry, like, is it going to become too much? But I really don't think it did. I think it struck the right balance between satire, but then also being insightful and shedding light on, certain events that are very important, and I think they did a really good job with that. even the social commentary with some of the other characters this season, similar to season 1, we do very much get a episode centered completely around different characters than the rest of the show. But unlike season 1, where this was a huge issue for me, I did not enjoy that episode at all in season 1. It was my least favorite episode because we just centered on such an unlikable character. This season, it's actually the opposite. The voter episode is my favorite episode of this season because it really gives you a chance to dive into a different aspect of the show. It focuses more on like this mother and daughter and their sort of conflict. One wants to vote for Peyton, one wants to vote for Standish, and then as the episode, and they pretty much are firm in who they want to vote for, but as the episode goes on, they start to see more and more of who these people are, and not only does it bring them closer together, but I think it's a really good way of showing that, like, certain viewpoints, just because you're older or you're younger, it doesn't mean that you have the better viewpoint. It doesn't mean that just because someone is younger, they're wiser. And same with being older. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're wiser. There is a commonality between the two. And I think that's something that this episode did a really good job with. And it ended up being, like I said, my favorite episode of the season. I really liked what they ended up doing with it. And for me, I thought it was easily one of the best parts of the season for sure. I thought it was a huge improvement over the first season, and I think it's a conversation that is very much needed during this election because, let's be honest, I mean, there's a lot of people that are voting in this upcoming election that probably have not voted, well, upcoming, but we're going through it right now, like this election, that haven't voted before, and I think that's something that the politician did a really good job commentating on, is that younger voters, the impact of them versus older voters who have done it before, how do they really fit into this? Who do they really vote for? Do they want the same things? Do they have the same policies? And I think that episode really brought that message home very nicely. The rest of the season did too, but I think that episode especially, is honestly one you can watch on its own. I think it's a really good viewing for parents and their kids that they might disagree with. Watch that episode and you might start to realize, like, oh, maybe you're onto something, or vice versa. And I think that's something that episode really brought home nicely. So that was definitely one of my favorite parts of the season for sure, and something that was a significant improvement. The other thing that I was a little bit worried about this season is what they were going to do with Gwyneth Paltrow's character, and I will say, at first, it feels a bit removed from the general story. It doesn't really feel like it needs to be here. It feels like the only reason she's here is because Ryan Murphy likes to wrangle, his favorites together in any way that he can, but as the season goes on, you start to realize she has more of a purpose than you would expect her to. You definitely, you definitely feel like there's more going on with her than it seems, and I think they did a good job with eventually bringing her into the story. So that's something that I was overall impressed with. Overall, I think the writing is very strong here. I think that it's about as strong as it was in the first season. There's a lot of things they definitely do very well in terms of writing. Cinematography is still really good here too. There are a lot of really good shots throughout the season that I think will very much stick in your mind, as most Ryan Murphy shows are constructed. Very good cinematography. The score as well, it's still that like sort of Western feel, and it's just as good as it was in the first season, and it's just as effective, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And similar to season 1, Peyton does have a few musical numbers, not nearly as many as season 1. In fact, they don't come until the very end of the season, but it is always a delight to hear Ben Platt's voice. He is very talented. I always enjoy hearing him sing on the show, and I'm glad that they still utilize that this season. I was a little bit worried at first that they weren't going to, and I was glad to see at the end that they very much did. The editing was something I had a bit of an issue with this season, because one of my problems with season 1 is that I thought it was a little bit too short. I wish they would have had like one extra episode before that finale to just tie everything together. This season has one less episode than season 1, and it kind of does show. It feels like Not that it was incredibly rushed, but it feels like Murphy was so eager to get to this season that he rushed it as quickly as possible. And I do feel that because of that, some of the arcs just didn't get as much closure as I would have maybe wanted it to. I think there needs to be a little bit more clarity with some of the characters, and I think that did hurt it a bit, but I think it is still very well paced. It's not done in a way that alienated me. It's not like Hollywood where I felt that entire show was like basically on ecstasy. This show definitely is moving at a good pace, but it did feel like every so often there were some things that didn't necessarily feel like it fit here. In terms of issues with this season, because again, I don't think this is a perfect season at all. There are a couple things that bring it down. One being that although I appreciate the dive we get into Dee Dee Standish, I don't think it was a deep enough dive. I felt like they were keeping us at an arm's length with her character. They don't really dive as deep into her as I would have wanted. It doesn't really go beyond the throuple and what she stands for. I would have liked to see a little bit more of like her before this candidacy. You know, what was she like? What made her want to become a politician? We don't really get to see that, and I think that might have brought things down just a bit for me. My larger issue with the season, though, is that some of these characters, unfortunately, I just don't think have much of a place in the show anymore. The show seems very confused, especially with what it wants to do with two characters, Infinity Jackson and Astrid. These two characters, they just don't feel like they fit into things anymore. Infinity especially is almost a completely different character this season. Season 1, you know, her grandmother was like faking her illness and things like that, and she didn't realize it, and so she got out of that situation. And now this season, she's basically like become this humanitarian of sorts. Like, she leads this group that are trying to prevent climate change, and it does tie into the main narrative eventually, but Infinity as a character just does not serve much of a purpose into this season, and I wish they would have done a little bit more with her. And then Astrid as well, because she isn't like the villain of this show anymore. You know, I was really curious in seeing what they were going to do with her, and the answer is really not that much. There is a subplot with her and Peyton and Astrid at first, and it's, you know, and Alice, and it's pretty interesting at first, but very quickly, it just feels like it didn't really go much of anywhere, and I just kind of wondered, like, what the point of her character was. There is an ending for her that's actually really good. I liked where they were heading with her towards the end of the season, but it just didn't really feel like it got that much of a wrap-up, and I think that did hurt things just a little bit. So that really is, like, my main thing with this season. I just think some of these characters, they didn't really know what to do with overall. But with that said, guys, now we are going to jump into some spoilers because I do want to talk about where I think this season is going moving forward. So some things that definitely did disappoint me a bit is that I felt like, you know, when you watch the 8th episode and, you know, you start off with the premiere, it does feel like some things have been skipped over. You know, we don't really, for Alice's engagement, for example, we don't really talk about that. You know, it feels like just, oh, her and Peyton are a thing now, and they're together, and there doesn't seem to be much hesitation there. There doesn't really seem to be a lot of worrying from Alice. So I was a little bit worried at first with the way they were going to go about it, but I thought they took things in a really good direction with them towards the back half of the season when Alice starts to wonder, is this relationship having an effect on her? You know, is this turning her into someone that she's not? Because Alice isn't interested in politics. She's only interested because Peyton is, and that's not really what she wants to do. She's not here to pursue politics. She's not here to be like this, you know, deceitful sort of person that Peyton is. That's not what she's here to do. She's not here to lie. She's not here to help others. She does want to help others, but it isn't to become a politician. It is to become a nurse of sorts. And I really like seeing that direction. I like that she now is like getting a medical degree and she actually wants to go further into that. And I'm excited to see what they end up doing there. And I thought her relationship with Astrid was a good gateway into that. I enjoyed the friendship that these two were starting to have, and that's why I felt like Astrid as a character was just not really well utilized this season. She has that really great moment in the finale where she talks about how she wants to, she doesn't want to have children. This isn't something that she's ready for. She wants to move forward. She doesn't know what her path really is. And I took it as the writers don't really know what her path really is. And then she just kind of leaves after that. And again, that's why I was just kind of disappointed with Astrid as a character this season. I just don't really understand why they needed to bring her back. Like, yes, they had the whole arc with her possibly still having feelings for Peyton, but that didn't really go much of anywhere. Aside from the fact that Astrid was pregnant. I did like the revelation that Astrid held her child, from River before River died. She had a child. She didn't tell him because River would have rushed things into marriage and she wasn't ready for that. I think that was a good reveal. I liked hearing about that. My problem isn't that. My problem is more that I think that they could have done a better job, utilizing her as a character. It didn't really feel like moving forward they know what to do with her, and I'm not really sure what her point on this show is anymore. And again, as much as I like Lucy Boynton, I just don't feel like she serves that much of a purpose. And the same really goes for Infinity. I think while Infinity, she cares about the climate change, and that's a big part of Peyton's campaign. I don't really feel like as a character she serves all that much of a purpose other than she will continue to be a part of his staff and she'll continue to work with him. It always felt like she was just kind of secondary. It didn't really feel like they had an idea of what they wanted to do with her, and that was disappointing because Infinity was one of my favorite parts of the first season. I just felt like this season she got kind of shafted as a character, and that was a bit disappointing for me. Everything else, though, the way things wrapped up, I was pretty satisfied with. I really liked where they ended up going with Dee Dee Standish as a character, where she realized that, yes, she does basically want the same things as Peyton, but she's not really the one to do it anymore. The younger voters are going to make a change. The younger voters have a candidate that they really do care about, and they have a lot of faith in, and I like that while the vote initially does tie, she agrees to step down, and now Peyton is going to have to deal with that. He's going to have to be the senator now. And is he going to be able to accomplish everything? And we saw that he was. I don't love the fact that they immediately skipped to 2 years later. I would have kind of liked to see sort of what he's dealing with. But that being said, I do like where we're headed in Season 3, where now Dee Dee is appointing him for this position because his mother is now going to be running for, she is president now. She's about to be elected for president, and after she steps down, because Dee Dee doesn't really feel like she's going to want to go longer than 4 years, Dee Dee wants to take over as president, which is something that we know she's always wanted. This is something that means a lot to her, but even more important is that she wants Peyton to be her vice, and I think this is a really good way to enter into the final season of the show. And yes, I said final season because Ryan Murphy already confirmed there's only going to be 3 seasons of the show, and I think this is a really good way to, like I said, move the show forward. I think there's a lot of places you can take this. It helps Dee Dee still be a part of the show. They could maybe even fix some of the things that I had problem with her this season, because like I said, I think at some point she was just a little too one note. I liked her as a character, but I didn't feel like I got to really peel back the curtain at Dee Dee in the way that I wanted to, and I think next season they might be able to do that moving forward. So I'm excited to see what they really end up doing there with her, and I think it's a really good direction for Peyton as well, because it's like now he's state senator, he's got a wife, he's got a kid, he's got all these people that support him, he's on good terms with James, which that was another storyline that I really wish they could have dived into more, the whole conflict between him and James, because James is his best friend, and it doesn't really feel like that's the case on this show. It feels more like McAvee is his best friend, or like Astrid is his best friend. It doesn't really feel like him and James are best friends, and I wish they would have done a little bit more there. And look, is it a leap of logic to believe that, like, say, Skye would still be helping out Peyton when they literally were responsible for almost killing him and went to jail? Yes, but it's like, it's one of those things where the show is already very much a satire, so I can just kind of, like, buy into that. So, like, something like that isn't really as much of an issue for me as, like, other things. So that's not really something that felt, like, rushed over. Like, I expected to not really get an explanation there because, again, it's just... It's satire. It's not, you don't need to take it so seriously, and it's fine for me to believe that, like, Skye would be there, you know, even though it's not really brought up. Like, it's fine. Again, I just hope that we get a really good, satisfying final season. I think things are in motion to make it very effective for sure, and I'm excited to see where else they can take the show moving forward, because I feel like there's still aspects that they haven't really dived into yet in terms of the political side of it, especially now that Peyton is in power, which we haven't seen before. I'm excited to see what they really end up doing with that, and I think there's a lot of possibilities moving forward for sure. So overall, guys, The Politician Season 2 is another really good season from the show. It does a good job of keeping up the satire, but also having some really good social commentary in there. I think that the performances are good as ever. Bette Midler, though, is absolutely the big standout. I just love everything going on with Hadassah Gold as a character. The season really is worth watching for her alone. I think that the writing is still really good. I think the way they're able to dive more into the generational gap, I think that's a really good arc for this season. I think the way they end things off in Season 2 is very effective. There are some times where it feels like they don't know what to do with some of the characters, but overall, it remains to be a lot of fun. It remains to be a show that I always am entertained by. I really am enjoying where these characters are going, and moving forward, I'm just really excited to see the way everything does wrap up for sure. So overall, guys, I definitely really did enjoy this season, and I am going to give The Politician Season 2 overall a B. But over, guys, to my review of The Politician Season 2. Let me know what you guys saw this season overall. Left your thoughts. And again, guys, I apologize that this review is late, but I knew that I wanted to get it out on Election Day. I thought that was the best time to do it, and I'm glad that I was finally able to get it out. That's really it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have voted, which you very much should, hope everything goes well there. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.